On the way back, he reprimanded me that I was doing the sales cycle upside down and I had no right to do that. I needed to sell like everyone else. I said, if I'm doing everything wrong, could you please explain to me why I'm always at the top of the sales scoreboard?
Welcome to episode 4 of the Top Down podcast. I'm Josh Mastel, your host and the CEO of Uproar Partners. We help business owners and startups drive sales by building and managing effective sales teams. Today, we're talking with Elinor Stutz, the founder of smoothsale.net, a best-selling author and speaker. Elinor started her sales career in a time in an industry where women were a bit blocked. She broke through those barriers to become a top-producing salesperson at all the companies she worked for and eventually a trainer for sales leaders. Elinor started her sales teaching career after an accident left her diagnosed as paralyzed for life. She used sales techniques and positive thinking to overcome that as well as many other obstacles. Well, Elinor, I think it'd be important for our listeners to have a really good summary of what you're up to these days, what you're doing. I know you have a really awesome backstory that we're going to dig into, and you're doing a lot of really cool things in the sales world. I think it'd be good to give us the 2-minute summary of what maybe a bit of your background and what you're up to these days with your work with Smooth Sale.
There are lots of twists and turns in anyone's career, and the worst lessons are the best lessons for the future. And so where I am today, in addition to being a speaker and an international best-selling author, I write what I see on a day-to-day basis. I take everyday experiences and put it into my blog. And I write it on a personal note, just the way I used to sell. And accordingly, the blog became quite popular. You can find it on my website, smoothsale.net, or on LinkedIn and Twitter too. And accordingly, I've grown my audiences, and today I'm proud to announce that the Tony Robbins Group asked that I would be part of their affiliate program, and then HubSpot made the same request. And again, with popularity, it's just growing, and it's very exciting to be at this point.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Tell me what gave you the inspiration to do that. I'm with you, and people love hearing and reading about true stories and real stories. There's so much stuff out there. I think that is just staged these days. People love, the realness of what's going on in the world. Give us a couple examples of some of the stuff that you're seeing, that you're posting and talking about, and what inspired that.
It's about people not thinking about the other person with whom they're trying to sell. So as a buyer, I observe what people are not doing correct. I never use their names. And then I use that as an example. And so it's just about thoughtlessness. And even email today, I can't stand the email that comes over and says, "Hey there, why not use my name? Is that so difficult?"
Yeah, you're so right. Let me ask you this. Do you, as someone in the sales profession like you are, I'm always very tempted when I'm on the call, say with a sales rep or something, and they're doing something that I feel like I could just help them so much by giving them some little advice. And sometimes I bite my tongue and sometimes I do it. Do you ever do it?
On occasion, I have, absolutely. And I said, please forgive me. I have a couple suggestions for future prospects. If you don't want to hear it, we can hang up now. If you think I might be able to help you, let's take a minute. And for the most part, they do take a minute and they thank me afterward. As long as you do it with diplomacy, there's nothing wrong with it.
Agreed. Are you seeing any trends out there right now? Are you finding yourself seeing and experiencing and writing about things more commonly now than, let's say, you did 3-5 years ago, that you saw 3-5 years ago? What are some of the common errors, mistakes, and pitfalls you're seeing right now?
Well, it's what we alluded to earlier. Because of software and technology makes things so convenient and fast, that the personalization is disappearing. And so I'm reading that the art of sales is losing out, and that the profession may go by the wayside because of the robocalls and the research buyers are able to do online. But I just spoke with a friend who's still in sales yesterday, and she agrees that that's not the case, that the better reps are doing extremely well, but it's the personalization that counts.
Yep. Now, I think we're going to be digging through a lot of that, as a trend throughout this talk. But I'd like to also shift gears here to You have a really cool backstory in that you've overcome some adversity, broken through a lot of barriers, that kind of thing. I'd like to dig into that and talk about a little bit of that. Do you want to share a little bit of that story? And I think we could engage a pretty cool conversation from there.
It begins with my back was to my husband as I was typing on the computer years ago, and I couldn't believe the words out of his mouth. He said, I have it in my mind. I know exactly what you should do for a career. You have the personality of a salesperson, to which I got up, turned around, looked him in the eye, and asked if that's a compliment or an insult. I had a very opinion of salespeople at that point in time. Was a stay-at-home mother for many years, and then I needed to go back to earn college money. So my first job, I actually cornered the sales director into hiring me. That's a whole other story. So he reluctantly did, and they did everything imaginable beyond what you could even create in your mind to get me to quit. But I'm not a quitter. I get more determined than ever. In fact, it motivates me to be successful. So think about it, and this is for your listeners in particular. Formal sales training or training from your clientele, which would work better? Obviously, getting the direct word of mouth from your clientele. Now, if you're in a good corporate setting and you're getting good training, pay attention. I wasn't allowed any. So my first job, it was the old days where you knocked on doors in your territory. So when I was invited in for an appointment, I'd ask what motivated them to invite me in. And I didn't know anything about the equipment I was selling. So I asked them, what was their interest? And then the questions developed into, how do you buy? What do I need to know? And I even asked, what would put me over the edge of all the other people asking you to buy from them? So I got tailored information from each client. But more than that, going back to the personalization, since I didn't know how to sell, we just had fun conversations. And they kept inviting me back to the point where the CEO said, you better buy from her or your job's going to be in jeopardy. So by the fourth month, not knowing a thing about what I was selling or how to sell, I became the top rep of the branch.
I love that. That's the true grind, man. People don't knock on doors anymore these days, do they?
No, they don't. Took a lot of energy, I can tell you that.
I love that. That's great. Okay, then I remember, I read some information about you had a neck injury or something that was kind of a little life-threatening, really scary, and that you fought through that. I always love hearing that happened to people, but I love hearing the stories of people coming out on the other end of that. You want to share a bit more about that?
Oh, sure. It's actually, I discovered later on that it was a near-death story. You read about these things, but never happens to you. I was the victim of two very bad accidents. And there I was at Stanford Hospital in California on a stretcher. And my family was, about a couple feet away with a consultant. And he was telling them that the best case would be paralysis and most likely I wouldn't make it. And I heard them burst into tears. But at that very moment, I had that unusual experience. A first vision came in front of me in the form of a report card. On the left-hand side, I had very high life marks. But on the right-hand side, it was entitled Community Service, and it was completely blank. So in the moment, I made a pledge that I would begin giving back to communities. And I'm a salesperson 100%. So in my mind and with a great beyond, I pledged that I would do so, but with a condition I would have full recovery and be able to walk out of the hospital on my own. With that first vision disappeared, a brilliant gold light came over my body, and a second vision came to me. And the second pictured me being a speaker far and wide, helping audiences. So again, in the moment, I said, yes, that's what I've always wanted to do. I promised to do that. And as soon as I heal from surgery, I am going to start helping my communities. And with that, the gold light gradually disappeared and the second vision disappeared. My family came over as soon as that was all over. And I said to them, don't worry, I'm going to be fine. Go home and get a good night's sleep. They probably thought I was delirious.
Now, I'm sure that as you share that story, there's some people that think, wow, that's kind of a wacky story, seeing visions and that kind of stuff. But hey, you know what? I feel like everybody, call it your calling or what you're passionate about doing in life. I think it's the most important part of that to me is that you're clear on what you should be doing. And I think there's so many people, especially young people out there, that are lost on what they should be doing. So I think that's pretty admirable that you found it in the way you did.
Thank you. Well, then I'd like to tell about the next morning. Well, actually, there are two segments that sales honestly saved my life. That night, a brain surgeon came into my room. It was unusual. He was there and asked if he could do an experiment on me. So I'm a risk taker and I try things to experiment. And I instantly said, sure, jokingly thinking to myself, finally, just what I needed, a brain surgeon. So he put extra weight on my neck. And the instant he did, I could feel it straighten out. The next morning, after being medicated, I was told I'd have 90 seconds with a surgeon to speak with him. And I expected words of encouragement, but the opposite was true. He told me best case outcome would be paralysis. And I used the mirroring technique, if you're familiar with it. I copied, and I never use it because I find it manipulative, but in this case, my life depended upon it. I copied his vocabulary, sound of his voice, look on his face, and delivered it with every ounce of energy in my body. And I said at the end, doctor, when I wake up, I fully expect to be well. It's the belief that you're going to have a good outcome. And the last thing I remembered was I'm jumping backwards. After surgery, when I finally awoke, he was standing over me and he said, there's no rhyme or reason for what happened, but you will walk out of this hospital in 4 days. And when I was put in my room, almost the entire medical staff on duty came to see me and they kept calling me the walking miracle. It took me years to sort it all out, but I finally understand what they were referring to.
Wow. What a cool story.
Thank you.
You brought up some really interesting points in there about mindset and dealing with tough situations, adversity. I'd like to talk about that. A lot of our listeners are, either salespeople or, startups that are trying to, get their business up and running, or small, medium-sized businesses that are maybe struggling with the sales team. Adversity is a reality of our world. And some people deal with it in a positive light, and some people just don't. In your experience, what do you see as some trends or reasons for why some people make it out of adversity and why others don't?
I believe it's down to personal development and working on yourself from the time that you're little. And if you just cowered, you just don't, and your parents didn't encourage you, you don't know how to stand up for yourself. I had to stand up for myself throughout my childhood, and I was in a city where I didn't fit in. And so I turned to reading, and reading actually changed the way I dealt with life. And I began traveling. I was interested in different cultures. I was interested in archaeology, and that affected my studies in college. Each decision you make affects your future outcome. So they're really important. You can decide at any point in time to be negative or positive. And once you I grew up in a negative household. But once I made that decision to be positive, made all the difference in the world.
I love that. Do you have any tips or tricks for that? I know Tony Robbins is big on mental priming. I know you mentioned Tony earlier, mental priming and having some kind of a process you follow every morning, or, whatever your kind of cycle is. Do you, anything specific you do for any kind of that priming or getting your mind in the right place?
I learned early in my sales career to focus on my goals and what the long-term vision is. And every single night I was diligent about what I wanted to accomplish the next day. Even my first job, I wanted to sell to Fortune 500 and 100 companies to get them on my resume. And believe me, it was a tough call without any sales training. But I kept telling myself every single morning, you can do this, Elinor, you can do this. And eventually you start believing you can do this. And then one comes your way and then another. And pretty soon you can say to yourself, hey, I can do this.
I love that. I go on these tangents sometimes about, I feel like a problem that I see in the younger generation. I'm sure that with the work you're doing in the sales world, you're dealing more and more and more with, the millennial generation. Shoot, I'm a millennial myself, 32 years old, but I see a lack of confidence as a real issue these days. And I believe that I know why that is, but I'd like to kind of hear what your thoughts are on that generation as a sales force, one. And then two, do you believe that there's some confidence issues there, and why?
I don't know if this is a fact or not, but it appears to me, that's the best way to put it, that they weren't given encouragement for independent thinking. And they were kind of coddled more than my generation, for example. I mean, we were just told, go do it. Do what needs to be done. And I don't know if that generation was. On the other hand, I admire that they're very into a collaborative effort and open communication, realizing that we're not an island. In the past, we grew up that everybody judged each other to the nth degree, and we had to fight our way out of that to get past those judgments. So there's pros and cons to both sides, in my opinion.
Sure, totally. I'm a huge proponent of the millennial generation. I've worked with them almost my entire career. Almost every one of my customers have adopted the philosophy of hiring young, fresh talent that are in that millennial generation. I love them. Here's where I feel like there's an issue. I believe parents, our education system, professors have beat into the heads of young people so much that they're just supposed to go follow their passion. Like, go find your dream and find your passion. And I just really disagree with that philosophy. I think that young people should figure out what you're good at first and go do that. And everybody was born with gifts. Go figure out what your gift is, use it, and use that to build confidence. And then you'll find your passion. Do you agree with that?
100%. That's a very good way to phrase it. Absolutely. Because, follow your passion. It could be multiple things. It could be going to movies and doing nothing all day. But you need the experience first.
If I was following my passion, I'd be golfing right now. I wouldn't be on this podcast.
Exactly.
Although I am passionate about this podcast, and I'm enjoying the conversation. But so you mentioned personal development earlier, and I love that topic. It's great for listeners who are managing sales teams or for business owners who are trying to set up their sales organization. I think creating a culture where personal development is driven into the minds of people that are working for them is important. Can you give some ideas of things you do for personal development outside of, I know you mentioned reading is really important. Outside of that, is there anything that you do you found to be successful?
Well, I'm at a stage now where I'm an entrepreneur and I test things out. I mean, I know I'm good at sales, that's a given. But entrepreneurial endeavors require a lot of trial and error. And I just keep after it day after day. Trust me, I've probably had a lot more errors than I had good deeds. But it's all playing out in the right direction. As long as you're willing to learn from things that went awry, there's no failure because you learned from it. It's the people who just get frustrated and quit that don't improve. They don't develop their arsenal of what works. And then a coach. Many years ago, I used to intermittently hire coaches to get to the next level because entrepreneurship is very overwhelming in the beginning. And he said, when you find one route that works well, leverage it to the best of your ability so that you have a more robust system in place. And I thought that was brilliant advice.
Let's talk about coaching for a minute. What do you do to vet your coaches when you're looking for a coach in your life to get you to the next level in whatever area of your life? Do you have a process for vetting them out to make sure they're the right coaches?
Anytime I go to buy something, they say that people think in threes, so I just use that as a model and I interview 3 different coaches. To me, it goes with hiring people and corporations too. You have to match values and priorities. Are they going to say they're coaching and just grab the money and not care? Are they going to really follow up with me to make sure what the advice they're giving works? I heed that whenever I did hire a coach. Today, I have wonderful peers that I have met online, quite honestly. They're incredible, and we learn from one another.
Yeah, I'm all about that, personal accountability to making sure you're, pushing yourself to never be uncomfortable. And when you're running a business as an entrepreneur, it's lonely up top, and you do need those peers or coaches, whatever they may be, to push you. My always fear is everyone claims to be a coach these days. I think with the onset of the internet being so accessible, I get hit up 20 times a day by people claiming they can help my business get to the next level. And I'm always like, well, you better have done it in the past. And you're not just trying to preach to me something you read in a book,
Exactly.
Let's hop over to the topic of, I love talking to just lifetime salespeople. Like, you are a proud salesperson. You've been one your whole life. So have I. I wear the badge with honor. I love that. And with that, you've probably worked for a lot of good and bad sales managers. And that really is, that's the topic of the Top Down podcast is I want to share and find and connect with all the, the best sales managers or salespeople that have had managers in the past to really help with the epidemic in the country of, I think, the sales world is failing in a lot of places because of really poor management. And I want to try to add as much value as I can to help people with that. With that said, could you have a story of the worst sales manager you ever worked for? You don't have to name names, and any kind of information about why they were so bad.
Trust me, one stands out. May I go back to the previous statement I wanted to make, though?
Absolutely.
Well, as you start growing, I should say as we start growing, people are going to put us down for our novel ideas. And what I've come to learn later in life is that the very worst sneer, sentiment hurled at you, or awful words, that means you are on to something very, very exciting that they never saw coming, and that you should by all means proceed with it.
I love that.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that out, and I only realized that recently.
I 100% agree with you. I think that is bad press is good press, so to speak, but I think you're right. If you're going to make a difference in what you're doing, there's going to be people that are going to speak up and disagree with you along the way. I agree with that.
And that's how I became an author. And that this one wasn't quite as bad. I originally self-published a book because nobody believed I knew enough about sales to be a trainer. And I proudly gave out copies to my social network at a holiday party in someone's home. And one person who I never got along with said, well, if your book were any good, a publisher would have picked it up. And in my head, I said, you can eat my dust. And the very next Monday, I met someone who represented authors to publishing houses. That book turned into an international bestseller. So use those awful words as motivators to keep on going. That's my best advice.
If you haven't yet, will you please get one of those international best-selling books, wrap it, and mail it to the lady who told you that? Have you done that yet?
Yes. It was actually a man, and he liked to think he was the authority. So the very next time we all got together, he saw me handing it out to the other people, and he ran into the kitchen, and I followed him, and I said, oh, you probably don't know, my book came out. It's highly rated today in the news, and I want you to have a special copy. And he turned red. So getting back to sales managers, good and bad, I think I had approximately 11 jobs in 12 years. In all that time, I only had one good manager. Now, you asked for the worst, and I'm going to tie it into what I previously said about matching values and priorities of the people you hire and get them to tell their stories about how they can contribute to the welfare of the company culture. This is the complete opposite story. This man did not like women, first of all. Was very rude to a couple of us that were on the team. I was a little later in my career, so pretty successful already. I had a multi-million-dollar sale at stake, but I needed a couple of questions answered. He refused to answer them. So I went to the director, and the director was nowhere to be found. The sale was getting very serious and the deadline looming ahead. The vice president quit the middle of the night. Nobody heard from him again. As you can imagine, the sale failed, and the potential customer was, upset with the company. He understood my position and he parted ways. And so then the HR woman came to the office and in a very demeaning voice yelled at me, why didn't you contact me when this first started to take place? And with a smile on my face, I looked her in the eye and I said, tell me, had I done that, could you tell me whose side you would have taken? And with that, Tears started streaming down her face because she knew the answer. She had to take the corporate side. And so, you know what happened to that manager? He was promoted upward to get him out of the way. The entire sales team, except for 2 inept people, quit within a week because they had had it. In the aftermath, the director of sales was fired, the VP was gone, sales manager was promoted, and most of the sales team was gone. Can you imagine? And they lost a $3 million sale, and this was in the late 1990s. Can you imagine how much money they lost? And it was an international company. Oh, the other side of it, I would have been the top producer for the entire corporation.
Wow. People leave managers. They don't leave companies. And it blows my mind that people still don't understand that. Why do you think that our organizations across the country are still full of poor managers? Like, what am I missing? Who's missing the boat here?
Well, my opinion, and I've spoken to many other salespeople, is that the people who are nice but not very good at sales are the ones who are promoted to management, and they don't know how to manage teams. They don't know how to help them.
So who's the right person then?
The right person would be someone who was successful and has ambition of climbing the corporate ladder, or at least being in management and has the desire to help other people succeed. And that's where I said early on in the interview, before you hire people, you have to check for their values and priorities, what they hope to get out of the job, how they plan to contribute to the culture.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, managing salespeople is a 100% 180 different job than being a salesperson. And it needs to be trained. It needs to be taught. So I think a lot of error happens in, like you said, you promote the nice person that wasn't good at sales, or a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll promote the best person. Like, hey, you were a great salesperson. Let's go manage now. And the problem is if they don't have the ability, the values, or the training on how to manage people, it fails every time. It's really sad to see.
I was at a company, it was in the construction industry, a very well-known company. And my manager, who was one of the type that I just described, demanded he go with me. I wasn't happy about it, but we went. While we're talking to my client, she was already a client, I felt him kick me under the table, and she saw it, and I was not happy about that. Anyways, I tried to smooth things over, and we parted on a good note. On the way back, he reprimanded me that I was doing the sales cycle upside down, and I had no right to do that. I needed to sell like everyone else. We're back in the office. In a really angry voice, he said to me, "Did you understand what I said in the car? You are to start selling like everyone else, or your job will be in jeopardy." And again, whenever anybody talks to me like that, I put a big smile on my face. And I looked at him and I said, "I'd be very happy to do what you suggest, but I have a question that I need answered first." And he said, "Sure, what is it?" I said, "If I'm doing everything wrong, could you please explain to me why I'm always at the top of the sales scoreboard?" His face grew beet red. He ran into his office and he didn't come back out till 5:00 and ran to his car. And that was the end of the conversation.
I love it. You don't mind ruffling feathers, do you?
No, not at all.
I don't either. I love that. So you mentioned you had one good sales manager, though, over the years. Tell me about that person and why were they so good? I think this is where we get a lot of value for a lot of listeners that are interested in being the best sales manager they can.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was my third job. And he's the one who taught me to always, for time efficiency, which is so important because salespeople have so much to do in a given day, to always keep a running task list. Keep crossing out what's accomplished and adding to the list, and have your eye on the week goal, the monthly goal, and, the yearly goal. And that started to change my numbers. I started to do much better. But more than that, he acted as if he were my coach. I always liken sales to football, where you need to reach goal and, knock it out of the park if you can. But you're knocked down along the way and you have to get back up and keep going, right? He was there coaching me every single time. And he did go to some meetings with me, and I loved what he had to say. He turned out his career was with IBM. So I told everybody afterwards I was IBM trained. It was like magic for my career.
I love that. Man, Elinor, I think we would be friends. We speak the same exact language sometimes. This is good.
Funny.
It's crazy. And, I had a sales guy the other day that I'm doing some coaching with at one of my customers. And he mentioned, I asked him something about like, hey, what's your process for this? Like, what's your process to follow up with XYZ? And he said, well, I'm really good at keeping things in my head. And I almost took my laptop and my entire desk and threw it out my window. I was so frustrated and shocked. So I'm glad you brought up that point about, and then obviously I taught him kind of a process to do that, but I'm glad you brought that point up. It's important.
I always ask clients, because everybody has different preferences, would you like me to follow up? And because I excel at it. And he said, sure. I said, which date and approximately what time, and how would you like me to follow up? Because some people like the phone, some, online or by email, whatever. Or would you like me to come back for a meeting? And so I'd have it down that personalized that they always welcomed my follow-up. And then when I got really good at this, I used to joke with people that I excel at follow-up, so please don't tell me to do so when you don't mean it. And that was another way of qualifying that I might be on the road to a new sale.
I love that. That's really, really great. One last kind of topic I want to run into with you is, we've mentioned, and through some of your content that I've read, and you mentioned earlier about how your boss wasn't a huge fan of you because you were a woman in the workplace. And I know there's been some barriers you've broken through over your career in, not being afraid to ruffle feathers and that kind of thing. What kind of barriers are you seeing today? Like in the customers you're working with, the salespeople you're working with, what kind of barriers are you seeing that are difficult for people to break through today? And what advice do you have for those people?
Well, I'm told, I finally got to a point where I have credibility and everybody's asking to connect with me. Not everybody, but a lot of people that are unexpected. So, I relish that. But for people getting started today, just know that one day it will be their turn to keep trying. If somebody, gives you a tough time, just know that they're better. It's like the sales principle. You need to get 10 no's, I think they say, to get to a yes. And you just keep searching for the better fit. Whether you're going to get promoted or you're going to get a sale, all of it applies. It doesn't matter. You just have to be determined that one day people are going to take notice of you. But to get to that point, you have to keep going. And then you have to be honest. For me, I was a nervous wreck on my first job talking to people, especially with executives. And so when an opportunity arose that came to my attention to take a public speaking class, I invested in myself, and that's really important. And I took a Dale Carnegie 3-month speaking class. The first day, I could barely get my name out in front of everybody. I was shaking like crazy. By the end of the class, I was the grand prize winner.
Good for you.
Thank you. That was the difference that it made. And during those 3 months, my sales, started to take off. And after the fact, I was so comfortable speaking with any type of person, any level, any culture, any type of company. Didn't matter. I was relaxed. And that's where you need to get to be.
The best advice someone ever gave me on that topic you're just talking about was my first job, a sales mentor of mine, Brendan Haas, the best salesperson I know to the day. He told me, he said, Josh, if you're not doing at least one thing every single day in your sales career that makes you uncomfortable, you're not doing your job. Such great advice, because if you do one thing every single day, over time, 10 years later, there's not going to be anything left that you're uncomfortable with.
Exactly. That's why as an entrepreneur, I'm comfortable with trial and error.
Shame. Well, Elinor, this has been an absolute pleasure. I will definitely be a follower of your content. And I think it'd be great, again, if you could one more time, let the listeners know how they can find you. Where would you like them to be guided to be getting more of your content?
Sure. My website is Smooth Sale. That's SMOOTHSALE.net, smoothsale.net. And that's where I post my blog during the week and provide sales tips too. I have books on the market. You can find them on Amazon. My last name is Stutz, Stutz. Nice Girls Do Get the Sale. Men read that book today and give me testimonials on it. So it's for people starting out in sales and perhaps mid-career too. That's the one that's an international bestseller. And for those looking for a job, you need to know how to apply sales skills to the interviews. So I wrote Hired, How to Use Sales Techniques to Sell Yourself on Interviews. And that's on Amazon as well. If you are interested in training, speaking, my number is 408-209-0550. And a sales tip is to repeat a phone number twice, 408-209-0550 on East Coast time. I really appreciate your having me as a guest, Josh. Thank you so very much. And if anybody wants to just send a question in, I'm happy to answer. It's Elinor, Elinor, @smoothsale.net. Thank you so much.
Of course, that's great. And also for all the listeners out there, I'm going to buy 3 copies of Nice Girls Do Get the Sale. And the first 3 emails that we get in to Let's Hunt at uproarpartners.com with the subject line Nice Girls, I'm going to mail those out to you for free. So the first 3 people to email in, I'm going to send you 3 copies of that book, or 1 copy of that book, the first 3 people. Awesome. Elinor, thank you so much. This has been awesome. So to recap, 3 things. Number 1, whatever barriers you have, whatever you're going through right now that's holding you back in your business, holding you back in your sales, holding you back in life in general, you can overcome it. Just like Elinor did, fight through it with grit and pound through them barriers. Number 2, make sure your salespeople aren't just blasting out impersonal messages and treating your customers like people behind screens as opposed to real human beings that have actual needs. And number 3, use your adversity and the ugly words from your haters as positive fuel for yourself. As Elinor put it, leave them in the dust. Make sure to go ahead and check out Elinor Stutz at smoothsale.net. And please share this podcast and visit us at uproarpartners.com to get more sales management wisdom. If you have any questions specifically for me, feel free to reach out. You can reach me at letshunt at uproarpartners.com. That's LETSHUNT at uproarpartners.com. And remember, everyone wants to eat until it's time to hunt. Make it a great day.